Your Excellency, Chedilalji, and dear friends, our President has just announced the subject about the responsibility of a spiritual man in times of crisis, national, international, and local. The obvious answer to this question of an average man, I don't mean to say a man in the street, but even an educated man, will be the question doesn't arise because spiritual people are an impractical lot. They are out of touch with the realities of the situations. They are lost in their clouds, philosophical speculations, or crystal gazing, and a variety of ways in which they are completely cut off from day-to-day affairs. Certainly they have no responsibility, and if you were to give them a responsibility, they are sure to make a mess of things. Now, why has this attitude formed in the minds of the general people? It is because down the ages, for centuries, spirituality in India has become a call to the wilderness. When a man turns spiritual, or when he is awakened spiritually, he gives up his worldly interests, withdraws to the forests, monasteries, mutts, devotes himself to scriptures, meditations and pujas and whatnot, and he is lost to the world. This turn of Indian spirituality has earned us a name that we are a fatalistic people. We do not believe in the reality of the world. There are enough philosophers with mighty tomes to prove that you do not exist. You exist only in the minds of those who look at you. All the world is an illusion, or the world is an inferior reality, which as you grow mature, you begin to realize that the world is a figment of imagination, playing somehow on the white bosom of Brahman, the Immaculate. It is folly to concern oneself with problems that really do not exist. Of course, there are treatises like the Gita, which in some passages make a concession, and they speak of loka sangraha. They say you have to devote yourself to the welfare of those around you as long as you move in this world of ignorance. But the ideal way is to find a way out. But as long as you are there, you have to fill your belly. You have to show your compassion and kindliness to others. This, in short, has been the orientation of spirituality in India. Now, this lasted for a long time. That it was not the character of Indian spirituality from the beginning is another matter to which I will draw your attention a little later. But this term started in the downward curve of Indian civilization. When the Indian vitality started ebbing, these localizing movements deprecating life around they started gathering force. But this was not the accent of true spirituality. Besides, in those centuries, life was not so much developed. Everything was divided into compartments. There was a compartment for polity, compartment for military, compartment for statesmanship, compartment for education, so also compartment for religion, compartment for spirituality. Each one was distinct. A lawyer would not think of trespassing into the territory of a doctor, and neither of them would think of questioning a religionist or a spiritualist. But that was long ago. During the last 100 years and more, human civilization, human evolution, the development of human consciousness has advanced so rapidly that there are no more real divisions, no more real segments in human life. Each one overlaps the other. So much so that a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher thinks he has something to take interest in the sphere of a scientist, and a spiritualist of today claims legitimately to take interest in every sphere of life. He does not accept that life is an illusion. He believes that the world is as real as he is, and if a problem is urgent to me, your problem is equally urgent to you, and both of us share the same earth, and the problems of each one have a claim on me, on a spiritualist who claims to have evolved a little higher consciousness, who claims to have built up a larger perspective. The world has a right to demand greater attention and more sincere service from a person who practices or claims to practice spiritual life. This is modern spirituality. Whether in India or elsewhere, there is no gulf, there is no demarcation between life and spirituality. The spiritualist is not one who turns away from life, but, mark my words, he is one who sounds for the depths of the spirit, which give him reality, which give reality to all of you, which give reality to the whole world. If a seeker of the spirit, a seeker of God, goes into meditation, goes into trance, prays to God, does any discipline, he touches certain depths of consciousness, levels of awareness, where he comes into a spontaneous contact with the consciousness or the awareness of other people. He feels their problems more acutely than a politician or an administrator conceivably could. He is more alive to the problems of the rest. And why? When a spiritual seeker looks into himself with a certain detachment that is expected of him, relieving himself from a total involvement in his own personal life of desire and egoism, he analyzes and sees that the body, the physical body, which is so real and urgent to him, is one. Matter is one. Physical earth is one. And his body is made up of various elements drawn from one common physical matter. He looks into his life force and analyzes how far it is his own. He is amazed to find that it is one life force, one life energy, the prana shakti, that is moving all over the world, and only a wave of it that is embodied in his body, he calls it his own. He looks a little elsewhere, he looks into his mind and sees how far is the mind is his own. He is amazed to find that the thoughts which he thinks are his own are really thoughts coming from the general atmosphere. He has read, he has mouthed opinions of others, he reads newspapers. All my thoughts come as manufactured goods into his mind, known and unknown. And his mind itself is a fragment of what is called the universal mind. He is a part of universal matter, he is a part of universal life, he is a part of universal mind. Then what else is left that he should call himself? His soul, you would say. Very well. When you look to your soul, what is that soul? Mamaiva amshaha. That soul is nothing but a fragment, a projected and a willed fragment may be, of the great reality that ensouls this universe. There is a great Godhead, call it by whatever name, we shall not dispute about the names. There is a reality, a divine reality, which ensouls this universe. And your soul, my soul, are only sparks from this universal fire in the terms of the old Upanishads. Then what is I? I am nothing. Everything I derive from something else. Once I recognize this fact, where is the difference of demarcation between outside and inside? For a spiritual man, there are no frontiers between his personal life and outside life, between inner and outer. Time was, those of you who have read ancient Indian history will remember that during the Vedic age, nobody made a distinction between spiritual life and worldly life. They embraced all in their vision. They spoke to gods, they communed with the gods, not for their self-liberation, but for the welfare of the general humanity. Samvadaddham, samvishadvam, they say, think alike, gather alike. They prayed that all people may have common thought, common hearing, common intuition in the heart. They were the days. Now the Vedic tradition of spirituality combined with the life of the world continued centuries later. And in the Upanishads, in the age of the Upanishads, which followed centuries after the Vedic age, we hear of royal sages, king sages, who ruled the kingdom as ideal monarchs, but who are also sages of unexampled purity. Doubtless you have heard of the famous King Janaka. He ruled his large kingdom as a model kingdom, and all the sages from all over the country flocked to his court, because he was known for his knowledge. Realized souls and sages came to him for advice, for wisdom, for corroboration of the wisdom they had got. And he was such a seer, such a saint, such a God-realized man, this model administrator, this model king, that one day when he was sitting, conversing with Yajnavalkya, the foremost sage of those ages, someone came running. One policeman at that time or some messenger came. Sir, your palace is on fire. He would not move. He continued the discussion. Second time, still he would not. Third time, somebody else told him, sir, your messenger has come, there is a fire. Mithilayam pradiptayam name kinchana daihati. Even if the whole Mithila were to be burnt, nothing of me will be singed. That was the attitude. And because he had that attitude of detachment, because he had that spiritual consciousness, which it gave him a command over the kingdom, He could set up rules, regulations, and in fact, during those days there was no necessity of ordinances and court judgments, because everybody respected, there was a dharma. The dharma was greater than the king, and the king himself respected the dharma. And everybody knew spontaneously, they said, no, this we shall not do. That in the pinnacle of our material civilization, we have forgotten the dharma is a tragedy of our times. And this forgetfulness of one's dharma, sir, puts a responsibility on the spiritual people, more particularly because they have some soul acquaintance with what the dharma is, what was called Rita in the Veda, what was called dharma in the later ages, what is called the truth law in our language. It is the spiritual people, the spiritual seekers of whatever tradition, who have a soul acquaintance, who have known what it is. It is their duty to speak of it, to practice it in their life, to set an example, to be fruitful members of a society by radiating the vibrations of that dharma and truth. Surely, spiritual people are not meant to be parasites on society. Those days are gone when mutts and monasteries could maintain armies and armies of people to serve the temple deities. Today, the deities are not in temples, but deities are there in the hearts of each person. And it is the duty of every enlightened man, not to speak of spiritually enlightened people, to devote part of their time to the service of the next man. As most of you are aware, I am a disciple of Sri Aurobindo and the mother. And the mother had always told us that whatever your preoccupations, whatever your studies, whatever your work in the ashram, at least 1 hour per day, each one must devote completely to an unselfish service. Without that, it is meaningless. Even spiritual practices, if they are aimed at your own elevation, it is a selfish spirituality. Spirituality, naturally one has to equip oneself, one has to learn LCPS and MBBS, MD to equip oneself. Thereafter, one should practice not only to make money, but to serve humanity. There, true spirituality lies in equipping oneself to discharge the responsibilities of manhood in every sphere of life that is posed from a higher level than the mundane. Spiritual people are so circumstanced that they do not have to look and function through a circumscribed perspective. They have a larger vision. They are certainly, if they are true spiritual people, capable of sacrificing their personal interests, personal cares, and devote themselves to God in humanity. God in myself. Realization of God in myself is not complete unless I realize God in you all. It is an incomplete spirituality. And to realize God, to serve God in the world around, is an indispensable step in the progression of spirituality. And then where do we start? As our distinguished chairman pointed out, we start with our immediate surroundings. Why talk of national and international crisis? First, let us start here. I happen to be one of the people working in the World Union. We had the same question in one of our committees, and the question was asked, the World Union ideal is so high, how will it appeal to the youth? How does it appeal to the man in the street? What are we to say to them? They say, we have no bread here, we get adulterated food, adulterated ghee, we have to give black market prices, the Gazette announces one thing, we have to pay double. All these things, where have we the time or have we the sense to tell us anything, to think of World Union? We said yes, World union should start with a union around ourselves. We should throw our weight on the side of every progressive cause that demands our attention and loyalty. We should convert ourselves in small groups to whatever persuasion we belong, in vigilance squads, groups of committees whose information and guidance can be relied upon by the administration, so that the administration is not fooled by interested news going to them and misleading. When a message or a report goes from a certain committee, from a certain vigilance squad, whose character, whose integrity is unquestioned, our friend here should not have the slightest hesitation in acting upon it. That should be an ideal condition that should be created. We should put our weight on all and every progressive side. But here again, we have to function not as Christians or Hindus or Muslims or Parsis or Jews, but we as spiritual people, as people who are awake to spiritual values, we have to rise above these denominations. We have to rise above these denominations and function as awakened individuals, members of a society who have duty to each other. Maybe I am better circumstanced. Maybe I can get 2 meals without difficulty. But that puts an additional responsibility on me to see that the other man also has something of this privilege. And a spiritual man cannot afford to be callous. He cannot afford to be insensitive. He has an awakened conscience that bites. He cannot speak untruth. He cannot participate in falsehood. I mean, if one is really spiritual, he cannot function on his ego basis. So the time has come today when it is the spiritual people, the spiritually awakened people, who have to move forward and provide the basis for disinterested leadership. They do not seek for power because they know that temporal power is nothing. It is the soul power of which Gandhiji spoke, of which many other saints have spoken. It is the soul power to which they have access. They should radiate there. It should be channelized through the spiritual people. It is their duty. They have to find the way. They have to create a climate. If I am a writer, I must create a mental climate upholding these values, spiritual values in life, saying that they are not meant to be practiced in isolation, but to be applied in life, in everybody's life, at the level that is convenient and possible. If I am an artist, I should utilize my art to the portrayal of this contribution possible for a spiritual man to the development of society. If I am a scientist, my spiritual vision, my spiritual intuition should guide me, should goad me to discoveries that will serve the nobler future of mankind. That is as far as the local perspective is concerned. In the national scene today, for instance, there is the crisis of integration, there is the crisis of character, there is the breakdown of all traditional values. People have forgotten what are the values. Does anybody seriously believe in integrity today? That anything can be done in government offices without corruption or bribery? That anything can be brought in the market without some underhand, black market prices? That you can travel 1,000 miles on the railways without bribing somebody or other? We take it as a way of life. We have taken it, yes, people will explain to each other, the poor, they are poor people, they have to live. And what the government is paying them is very little, doesn't matter, you don't grudge it to give. So there I hold that the man who receives the bribe is as guilty as the man who corrupts him. It is all right to say that even if I don't corrupt, he continues to be corrupt. But that's a way of putting things. But a spiritual man shall arrest this tendency. He should be prepared to suffer for his integrity. One such shining example in the city of Pondicherry, for instance, if one individual rises and stands up, I assure you, tomorrow 100 individuals will cluster around him and give strength to his elbow. It is the awakened people who have to do it. Whether it is the problem of integration, price level, inflation, everything, as he said just now, has its root in one thing: selfishness. Government may pass any legislation, Parliament may pass any ordinance, but unless the persons concerned are willing to sacrifice their ego interests, are willing to rise above their ignorant nature and exceed their ignorant manhood, allow themselves to be influenced by spiritual tradition, allow spiritual leadership to guide them, and the spiritual leadership should necessarily earn its right to guide the people. How are we going to meet the crisis? The international crisis is still separate. It is very difficult. Spiritual people today can hope to turn the tide in India, because in India, whatever is said and done, there is still the faith in spirituality. I have known communist leaders telling people to wait, we are doing puja. They are doing puja for 2 hours. They are the communists. I don't make fun of it, but I admire them. They separate. Their political ideology is different. Their personal beliefs and faiths are different. But in India, whatever the political parties in power, the respect, the loyalty to spiritual values is ingrained in the race. I have talked to a number of friends from the West who told me that the moment they step from the aeroplane on this Indian soil, they have found a sense of liberation. They have felt a purity. And when they are obliged to go back, some of them, because of the sins of others, the government not renewing their visas, you have to see how they suffer. They say, we can't, with the best of our abilities and efforts, we can't create this atmosphere of purity and God aspiration elsewhere. In India it is still possible, therefore, to influence the events, to turn the tide in favor of sanity, if all the spiritual elements of the country would cooperate meaningfully, not in the sense of holding dialogues, conferences, where each one parrots his own position, hoping to find loopholes in another's position and go score debating victories. No. Let some of us, representing different spiritual traditions, sit together, find common grounds, meet in areas where there is no dispute, and start cooperating there. Why not? Outside India, it is difficult. There are the ecological problems, economic problems, oil crisis, European community, Asian community, each with its own problems, where I personally do not think, sir, spirituality has yet a ready ground. First, we have to demonstrate in India that it is possible to govern this whole subcontinent on spiritual values by invoking the spiritual forces that have been presiding over our destinies. And it is only then that when we demonstrate the success, that the adjoining countries might open up to these possibilities. And whether in New York or in London or France or Moscow, the mentality will begin to change. A spiritual man has a great responsibility. He has to react from every pore of his being if he is sincere. He has no individual personality and life to live. As he progresses, as he widens in his consciousness, as he scales the heights of his being, his consciousness floods and floods more and more, and he embraces the whole of universe in his consciousness. It is time that he learns to translate something of this inner realization in outer practice. I have done.
Thank you, Mr. Pandit, for a very